that we're still the strongest nation in the world. But I have great faith in the resiliency of the economy, and no question about it, this incident affected our economy, but the market's open tomorrow, people go back to work, and we'll show the world.
Bush administration very much hopeful that the U.S. markets will show the world that there is a rock to be found in the United States, a rock of stability, economic stability. All of our reports this morning about jittery markets in Asia, jittery markets in Europe. The Bush administration is very hopeful that if not on the upside, at least if the markets in the United States are on the downside, they are only nominally so. Bush White House will have to monitor that closely and react as events dictate. There is a new CNN USA Today Gallup poll that places the president at his highest level of approval of 86%, only 10% disapproval. That's the political environment the president and his national security, diplomatic, and economic team find themselves in. We can compare that with other presidents at key moments in their administrations. You can see Dwight David Eisenhower, December 1956, 79%. Lyndon Johnson, 78% right after the assassination of President Kennedy. President Jimmy Carter, March 1977, 75%. President Reagan, 1986, 68%. Of course, President Bush's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, February 1991, 89%. That would be right after the culmination of the victory in the Gulf War. President Clinton, 1998, 73%. President Bush topping some of those numbers, 86%, only 10% disapproval. Tremendous unified support. White House acutely aware of that. But as it relates to whatever military action it may take, it is trying to channel that public support, maybe spread it out over the long term, because as the president and every senior advisor who fanned out on the Sunday talk shows told the country, this will be a long and sustained campaign, no quick fixes. So the administration hopes it can take that very visible public support, channel it not only for now, but for the days and weeks and months ahead. Leon?
All right, thank you very much. Major Garrett in Washington this morning. We'll be talking with you quite a bit in the hours ahead. Carol, over to you.
Leon, we have more now on this criminal investigation. There have been 2 new arrest warrants issued for what investigators are calling material witnesses to the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. And the FBI is looking for clues at apartments in Florida and New Jersey. But as CNN's Mike Betcher reports, the big manhunt is for an elusive worldwide terrorist.
The FBI was back at this apartment house in South Florida, taking away evidence. It's believed to be the residence of Saeed Al-Ghamdi, one of the suspected hijackers on United Flight 93. At least one other hijacker on the same flight may have lived in the same building. All over the country, leads are being pursued. 2 more arrests for material witnesses were issued. 2 people are already in custody. And in New Jersey, just across the river from New York, another apartment was searched. This one was the residence of one, possibly both men, picked up off an Amtrak train allegedly carrying cash, airline tickets, and box cutters. But the top of the most wanted list has not changed and will not, according to U.S. officials. But the effort to add suspect names after Osama bin Laden is accelerating both in the U.S. and internationally.
He headed it up and organized it, but it's a very broad, kind of loose coalition of groupings. It includes not only his forces, but it also includes, for example, Islamic Jihad from Egypt.
Members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad filled the top ranks of bin Laden's al-Qaeda organization. Islamic Jihad's leader, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, was at bin Laden's side during this 1998 press conference. Widely considered bin Laden's chief lieutenant, Zawahiri is also his personal doctor. Like bin Laden, he's believed to be in Afghanistan. Bin Laden denied he was responsible in a statement released Sunday through an Arabic-language satellite news channel. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules, he said. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations.
He's a prime suspect, but we have to be realistic. This is not a person. That's the problem. It is a whole host of people and a whole host of countries that are harboring those people.
The head U.S. officials are sure of, bin Laden, but hidden under the cloak of al-Qaeda's mastermind, a complex organization, harder to identify, and just as their leader, elusive. Mike Betcher, CNN, Atlanta.
Afghanistan's neighbor, Pakistan, is now issuing an ultimatum to Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, which is harboring him in Afghanistan. CNN's Mike Chenoy has more on this interesting message. Mike?
That's right, Carol. The message is coming from the top officials of Pakistan's military intelligence service. This is the organization that over the past half-dozen years has had close links with the Taliban and indeed has been central to the Taliban's ability to come to power and stay to power in Afghanistan. But that message now is that the Taliban has only a few days in which to turn Osama bin Laden and his associates over. Otherwise, Afghanistan risks devastating attack by the United States, an attack in which Pakistan would support the United States. That message is being conveyed in meetings in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar. That's the usual base of the Taliban leadership. However, Pakistan's foreign minister says that his country has limited influence with the Taliban despite the close links of recent years.
Well, Pakistan has always sought to give correct counsel. We have always emphasized in the past that it is important for Afghanistan and its people that the government should act in conformity with international law. Of course, the assumption that Pakistan is in a position to exercise complete influence is flawed in our opinion. We have constantly pointed out to our friends that we have diplomatic relations, but that doesn't necessarily translate into great influence.
All the indications so far are that the Taliban leadership will rebuff the Pakistani message, and increasingly, therefore, attention is going to turn to what kind of military action will likely follow. There is word here that Pakistan is expecting a high-level interagency delegation from the United States of diplomats, military, and intelligence officials in the next few days to discuss those options as Pakistan seeks to strengthen its cooperation with the United States.
The discussions that we have held with the government of the United States deal with principles in general. Pakistan will extend full cooperation in the fight against terrorism. As for the specifics, we expect consultations, and we understand from the news that a group of high-level officials from the United States will be visiting Pakistan in the near future. We would like also to know the plan that the United States has in mind, and then we will discuss what and to what extent Pakistan can be a partner in the fight against terrorism.
Those specifics will likely include access by U.S. aircraft to Pakistani airspace, logistical support, certainly intelligence sharing. The Pakistani intelligence service probably knows more about the Taliban and has had more contact with them than any other outside organization in recent years. It may also eventually involve stationing of U.S. troops here in Pakistan, at least as a staging ground if they were to go into Afghanistan. That has raised some concerns in this overwhelmingly Islamic country where there is a substantial body of opinion, particularly among Islamic fundamentalist circles, highly critical of the government's move to side with the U.S. There were demonstrations in several cities on Sunday by Islamic fundamentalists criticizing President Musharraf for his stand allying himself with the U.S. and warning that if that cooperation proceeds further in the days and weeks ahead, that there could well be trouble on the streets for Pakistan's government. Carol?
Mike, and is it true or is it not true that some of these Islamic fundamentalists inside of Pakistan are actually suspected of working with Osama bin Laden and helping him train some of his troops?
Well, the links with bin Laden are always very shadowy, but there is no question that some of the Islamic fundamentalist groups in Pakistan have long-standing religious and organizational ties with the Taliban. There is a network of Islamic religious schools dotted around Pakistan run by these Pakistani Islamic fundamentalist groups that have trained many key officials in the Taliban and have trained as well many young Pakistanis who have crossed the border and fought with Taliban forces in Afghanistan's ongoing civil war. So there are long-standing religious, political, and military links between some of the Islamic fundamentalists here and the Taliban. To what extent those links extend to Osama bin Laden's own organization remains a very, very murky question.
Murky indeed. All right. Thank you very much, Mike Chinoy, reporting live. Leon?
And while General Musharraf and Pakistan in general find itself now in this situation being between a rock and a hard place, we find that Afghanistan, that country, is now under a cloud of fear as that nation is bracing for a possible strike by the U.S. But as CNN's Nick Robertson says, if push does come to shove, there is also a grim determination to support the ruling Taliban.
Bustling trade in Afghanistan's street markets belies an impending sense of isolation beginning to grip many Afghans. Concerns about the likelihood of an American attack and the possibility borders with Pakistan and Iran may close have driven food prices up 10 to 15%. Concern also Afghan people could become innocent victims. They should wait until it's clear Osama was involved, this vendor says. America shouldn't make any attack on Afghanistan, this trader says, because the Afghan people are not involved and not responsible. Many here, however, are too poor to flee the cities. 22 years of conflict has ruined infrastructure and economy alike. The years of war have also built up a resilience among many Afghans, to the point where a new attack would be a continuation of their ongoing battles. The result of Russian aggression was the breaking of Russia into 16 countries, this old man says, remembering the 1980s Soviet occupation. If America attacks us, Allah will divide America into 52 pieces. From influential tribal elders, not necessarily aligned with the Taliban, however, a call for diplomacy.
We advise the Taliban that they must discuss everything with everyone and not close the doors to negotiation.
However, the tribal elders also said if Afghanistan is attacked, they will back the Taliban to the end, a sentiment echoed on the streets here. As the last of the international aid workers began leaving because the Taliban said they could no longer guarantee their safety, Afghanistan's total isolation appears now closer than ever. Nick Robertson, CNN, Kabul, Afghanistan.
There is so much uncertainty these days and lots of opinions out there in terms of what is to come and the American mood and the American appetite for some retaliation and who's going to help or not. In taking a look at some of the major newspapers this morning, this from the Chicago Tribune editorial section says Pakistan is a fragile government in a bad neighborhood. It will have more capacity to help us if we recognize that helping us can't be its only concern.
All right, check this out. We got this from the New York Times this morning. It says that in the days to come, some New Yorkers will no doubt have occasion to differ with the president on the decisions he makes, both political and diplomatic, but they will do so as members of the same American family. By his actions over the last week, Mr. Bush has won the first battle of the war.
And out of the American Capitol, from the Washington Post, they write, so yes, life resumes today and should, even as more bodies are recovered and more funerals planned. The stock market reopens, the Pentagon bustles, there will be the usual jams on the Beltway, that's the highway outside the city. This will feel right and not right. That is our life from here on in. Well, in the midst of death and destruction surrounding last week's terror attacks, an unusual number of babies were born in New York. Finally, some good news to report. CNN's Beth Nissen reports for some parents it does symbolize a new sense of hope.
The outside walls of New York University Medical Center in Manhattan are papered with the names, descriptions, and photos of the missing. Many shown with their children, carrying them, feeding them, holding them in their first days in this world. Yet at the end of a week when thousands of lives ended, there is this small comfort, knowing that other lives have begun. Meet Nora Rose Draper, born September 15th, one of 56 babies born here since Tuesday morning.
I've just felt so good since she's been here for the first time since that day.
That day, the day the World Trade Center was attacked. The labor nurses here logged an unusually high number of births Tuesday.
22,
22, baby, 24 hours. That's a lot. That is a lot. That's a lot.
Nurses say high stress often triggers labor. It did for Lorraine Tobias. She watched the horror unfold on television all last week until Friday night.
Like it just hit me. But then that night I went into, my water broke and she came.
Came 3 weeks early.